There we go. Bingo, we got it.
We're-
Well, hello, everybody. I am really excited to finally get the technology working. We were going to bring this live to you, but Facebook had other plans. So we're going to do this via Zoom video for you guys. But I'm really excited to have Miss Wendy Gross with us. Correct? Did I say that right?
It's close enough. I answer to anything, Desiree.
And she is, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody and kind of tell them who you are, where you are, what you do.
Absolutely. Well, I'm in Naperville, Illinois, a little bit west of Chicago. Chicago girl at heart. I am an LCPC, which is just a bunch of alphabet soup, but a licensed clinical professional counselor. Been doing that for about 20 years, and am an owner of a counseling agency here in town. And just kind of a, average do-gooder out in the neighborhood, doing lots of volunteering and things like that. And I'm just excited to be here with you.
Oh, great, great. And I had done a Facebook Live in the group. Oh, this was last week. And people started interacting and talking about, as we're dealing with the coronavirus, COVID-19 crisis, and we're all have been pretty much ordered to a social distance. And really, now today, my community just received the order to stay home order.
Mm-hmm.
So before it wasn't as stringent, and now, and I've heard this all over the country, if you're not on lockdown, you're pretty close to being on complete lockdown. And so with that being said, I'm hearing some reoccurring themes from patients around the stress and the coping, mechanisms that they may have to deal with not only social distancing, but the fact that we're dealing with something we really haven't as a country dealt with before. We've dealt with wars in the past, but nothing really as a pandemic like we're having now
Right.
in this century, right? So, I kind of wanted to have a conversation with you to kind of, number one, kind of give our audience some strategies, tips, tricks, to kind of get through the whole social distancing and isolation and the mental wellness around that piece.
Mm-hmm.
So we can kind of jump into that. And I have some other questions for you too.
Okay. Well, I think, you hit the nail on the head there. What makes COVID-19 makes everyone so nervous and so anxious is it's unpredictable. We just don't know enough about it yet. It's seemingly uncontrollable. It probably is controllable, but again, it's that lack of knowledge that we have about it. And it's gone from being an acute emergency to almost a chronic stressor. Because as you mentioned, some states were on lockdown. Illinois, we've been on lockdown about a week. And I love how we call it lockdown, because I'm sure that if we were in prison, we would have much less in the way of options that we actually really have now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I'll probably share with you a little bit, is that we have more choice than we realize, but we affectionately call it lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
So it's those three things, I think, that's really driving feelings of anxiety and fear, because it's uncontrollable and it's lasting longer than most stressors do.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you could give our listeners just a couple of kind of strategies to deal with, not only for themselves, and I'm one of these people, I'm really transparent, I'm pretty much the rock of my family, my extended family and my daughter and the children, and me and my husband are trying to do our best to really keep the kids' minds occupied. But I see the stress that is taking a toll on them. Their routines are all over the place. They're not in school anymore. They're not with their friends. We're home and working from home, and things have really changed. So what are some strategies that we can do, not only as patients and caregivers, but just community members, to kind of get through this?
Well, I think you brought up an important thing. The first thing is our kids, right? Because we're always concerned about how they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's first. And so I always want to say that what's caught is so much more important than what's taught. So
Mm-hmm.
I might be able to give you some ideas, which I promise I will. But remember that it's your attitude and what they see you doing that's really going to make an impression on them now. And we have an opportunity to really teach our children to be adaptable and resilient now, which
Yeah.
is really important. It's a skill they'll use the rest of their lives. You mentioned that this is something none of us have really experienced. And you and I, we have not. But I spoke to an older gentleman in his 90s, and he said to me, "Oh, this is no different than when my best friend died when I was 12 of polio." And he
Yeah.
goes, "Oh, we couldn't go out, and we couldn't go to pools." And he goes, "And that was just normal." So I think we're maybe this first generation that's not experienced something like this.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that made that generation more resilient and more adaptable. So if we're looking for the good, what the good lesson is, maybe that's it. I also think we need to look at this from the children's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
When we start worrying about how the children are kind of taking to the new normal, I like to call it,
Mm-hmm.
we look at it through our eyes as adults. But if you look at it through their eyes, it actually be quite different. It could be bedtimes aren't quite as strict as they used to be. You can sleep a little bit later in the morning. They're
Mm-hmm.
spending time with their family. They're playing board games. They're connecting. One thing I often hear in counseling sessions is parents asking me, how do they cut down on screen time for their kids? Well, you know what? Steal down screen time. Have as
Mm-hmm.
much screen time as you want. There's educational things on that screen right now. So try to look at it from your child's point of view and look for those positives. Maybe they can help you make a meal where before you used to pick up something on the way home. So and actually, I'm not a teacher, though I do have a master's in education. I can tell you that making a recipe is chemistry and math and life skills.
And that's a good point. And it's something, in all honesty, I think I've been overthinking it. And so, yeah, it's a good, opportunity for us to really build those life skills. I can honestly say with full transparency, when I was 12 years old, because my daughter is 12, I was able to cook full blown meals. And I think where my kids are they're kind of spoiled because we've been doing all these things for them. So,
Well, if you would have told me at 12 I could take off a few weeks of school,
yeah,
I would have been all over that.
yeah. So the other thing that is really what I've been hearing is in different spaces. I've been talking to different patients and just checking in with different patient groups. And a lot of the family advisors, patient and family advisors, are really having a tough time dealing with this, as far as, you're so used to volunteering at your hospital system. You're so used to even going to the doctor for whatever comorbidity you may have. And now all that has changed. So for adults, moms and dads and grandmoms, any ideas for them to kind of deal with the social distancing and isolation of COVID-19?
Well, so again, it draws on us to use resources that we actually know about, but that we don't always use.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the perfect time if for some people life is slowing down. Now for some people it's not. And we have to remember that too. Anybody in the medical profession, anybody allied to the medical profession, life is not slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
But if it is slowing down in your situation, this is the perfect time to have that hour-long chat on the phone with a girlfriend you haven't connected with for a long time.
Yeah.
This is the time to maybe write some letters, maybe some journaling. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
there is a shoe closet somewhere that's calling your name that needs to be cleaned out. Staying busy and distracting ourselves is one of the best things that we can do to get rid of that anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is a routine. And I'm not saying a strict routine like we're not in the military, not that type of routine.
Yeah.
But some sort of routine where we get up, we take a shower, we get dressed. If you're a woman, you put some makeup on. If you normally don't wear makeup, don't put makeup on. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But that you have some semblance of a routine.
Mm-hmm.
And they can be small things. My husband and I end our workday because we're at home, right? So it's not like we're being able to end our workday the usual way by actually coming into the home.
Yeah.
We stop and we have cheese and crackers, and which just sounds so silly, but it's
Oh.
becoming a placeholder for that time between work and the evening.
Yeah.
And it's important to put those rituals into your schedule
Mm-hmm.
to help add some normalcy. The other thing that I think is going on right now is we always have to balance our stressors with our coping mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
And in my head, I have one of those old-fashioned scales with two sides on it in my head. And
Mm-hmm.
as we pile more and more on the stressor side, and that's what COVID-19 is doing,
Mm-hmm.
we then have to remember to put more on our coping mechanism side.
Mm-hmm.
And a coping mechanism is going to be different for everyone. For some people, it's a bubble bath or a hot shower. For somebody, it's going outside in nature for a walk or maybe a run. Um, Everyone's toolbox of coping mechanisms is going to look a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
But if you haven't opened up your toolbox in a while and looked what's in there, this is the time to look in it. And maybe it's journaling.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it is calling a friend. Maybe it is talking to your therapist, right?
Yeah.
That the coping tools could be anything. It could
Mm-hmm.
be art. It could be cooking, like we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
My joke is in 9 months, there's going to be a lot of babies and a lot of people going to Weight Watchers. I am working way too close to my kitchen.
I can totally relate to that. I'm like, oh my goodness, if I snack on something else, oh my gravy.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the other thing that I think that you've done a really good job in leveraging is, telemedicine, telehealth. CMS has really lifted a lot of the restrictions and guidelines to kind of open up
Mhm.
the use of telemedicine. And I know that you have really been using that. So could you tell us a little bit about your practice, your experience with leveraging telemedicine, and also how, if there's anyone watching and would like to utilize your services, how can they get in touch with you?
Sure, absolutely. I feel like I was very lucky. Sometimes you're just in the right place at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And our practice has been around for, oh gosh, years now. We were early adopters of telemedicine and telehealth. And we were doing teletherapy for clients who had other barriers to coming into the office, whether it be a physical barrier or
Mm-hmm.
even that time crunch of a busy
Yeah.
working person who needed to
Mm-hmm.
get that therapy in at lunchtime, but driving half an hour to an office and half an hour back to was just too
Yeah.
much. So we've always been doing this. It's not new for us. What's new is now that people that would like to participate in teletherapy
Mm-hmm.
are beginning to hear more about it. And like you said, changes were made in the insurance industry
Mm-hmm.
because telehealth and telemedicine has not always been covered at the same rate as our regular doctor's visits.
Yeah.
Thanks to changes last week, it is now covered exactly the same as an in-person visit to a counselor or a doctor.
Wow.
So it's opened the door, yeah. And
Wow.
that's made a huge difference. But it's really a wonderful way to, in this time when we don't want to go places we don't need to go, and we're asked by our
Yeah.
governors not to go,
Yeah.
to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're fooling ourselves if we don't think that what's going on now with COVID-19 is trauma. It really is trauma.
Yeah.
And unaddressed trauma causes problems. So I think that anyone right now who is working through the trauma will find themselves in a much better place when this is over.
Mm-hmm.
And again, telehealth is easy. Myself, I was resistant to it. My own physician does it, and I said, no, 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 I want to come in, right? Because I want that relationship.
Yeah.
And because I've been using it now for months, I have found it's very much like our Zoom call. The screen fades away, and all I see is Desiree.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and I feel like I feel when I see you. And I haven't
Mhm.
seen you in a year and a half now in person. And that's what happens in telemedicine and telehealth is the first moment or two may feel awkward, but
Mhm.
then the screen goes away and you connect with the person that you're looking at, and it works.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really amazing. But I know there's some resistance to doing it the first time because it's
So,
different.
yeah, and people, I think, as a whole, I think we're all kind of resistant to change at some point. But you touched on something, access. And I think about my work with CMS in the Transforming Clinical Practice Initiatives and engaging rural practices, critical access hospitals in different areas, urban areas where therapists aren't as available. It just opens up the gates to people to receive services is meeting the patients where they are. And we've been speaking that language and kind of preaching that doctrine, but I think this is a very happy medium. And so, it's always been, oh, HIPAA's of this and that. And now with COVID-19, all of that has been wiped away really quickly. I mean, it's still there, but the purse strings have loosened fairly quickly. So
very quickly.
we're doing it and it can happen. So I'm optimistic, cautiously optimistic that at the end of COVID-19 that we don't go backwards, that we continue to move forward, because I think, this is sometimes you're forced to do things whether you like it or not. And so I'm excited about that aspect of it. So if anyone's watching and listening and they would like to have your services, are you available to service them wherever they are in the country? Kind of tell us a little bit about that, and also where can they get in contact with you?
I would love to. So there are different regulations based for psychologists, counselors, social workers, marriage and family therapists. So the rules are a little bit different. For some of us, as long as the counselor, the therapist is in the state they're in, like I'm in Illinois, I can work with people all over. Psychologists have to be licensed in the state that their client is also in. So there are some nuances, but like I like to say, don't worry about those. Let the professionals, let us figure that part out for you. If anyone would like to talk, you can always email me. My email is Wendy, Wendy, @Grow Wellness Group. I know that's a mouthful. And when you spell it out, there's lots of L's and S's, but it's growwellnessgroup.com. I would be happy to answer questions. We do have availability for telehealth, so that's an option. And if you are in a state where perhaps our license doesn't work, I can also connect you with someone in your home state. So I would be more than happy to be that connection for people right now, because I think we've done a great job of getting the word out like you're doing, Desiree. So thank you for letting people know that there's access and they can do it from the safety of their own home. So we're not adding anxiety, right? And that there's people out here to help. And, I kind of think like Lady Gaga, I was born this way. I was born for this moment to be able to help connect people. Yeah. So thank you for letting me share that.
Oh, you're welcome. And we appreciate you. And, I appreciate just as a whole, all our providers that are out here, whether you're behind the computer screen or at the front lines, we're all in this together. And I think, it's going to take our collective efforts to get through this and sustain, I would say, as a best practice of what we're doing. And so, I'm excited, about the future. And I think that this is something that as we spread what's working, a lot of times we get hung up on, oh, what's not working, and people complain. But complaining about it doesn't really change it too much, right? We need to come up with solutions. And I think this has been really a great solution, for my peers and all the, Americans that are pulling up the bootstraps and getting in this together. So I'm excited about that. So I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule between patients and work and home life balance to spend this time with me. And I'm glad we finally got the technology means to do it.
We did. And thank you again for inviting me. And I have to tell you, it's been a pleasure just to see your beautiful face again. It's been too long.
Well, thank you, Wendy. And I hope once all this passed that we will see each other soon. I'm sure we will, as we're working in the same circle. So I will see you sooner than later.
Thanks so much, Desiree.
You're welcome.